everybody. Welcome to Rachel's Reviews. And today we are continuing on our series of talking about the best of animation. And today we are getting our little clay puppets and moving things around because we're talking about stop motion. Very exciting. It's such a wonderful medium. And I am film critic Rachel Wagner, and Matt Renee's here.
Hey everybody! I totally agree with you that it's a wonderful medium. I would even say an underrated medium.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think makes stop motion special compared to the other animation forms?
Well, what stop motion is that this is like the earliest form of 3D. You gotta keep it. There was even a time when stop motion was a very dominant force in visual effects, especially with Ray Harryhausen and even the early days of King Kong. I think with stop
Mm,
motion is I guess it's kind of like that similar kind of magic that you would get in something like Toy Story, where it's basically bringing actual inanimate objects and then you would go and bring them to life. Where is an aspect where there is a reality to it that technically it is a picture of it's a picture of like actual 3D objects, and then like slowly but surely, like you just move them bit by bit and then they bring them to life. It's a little
yeah.
bit of a combination of animation and puppetry, and you bring those two together, and that's where you would go and create this unique and I would even
Yeah.
say timeless art form.
Yeah, there is an attention to kind of detail that is really special in stop motion that every single little tiny, bottle and cup and just everything is all made as an actual as opposed to, entered in as code, like with CG and things like that. And there's something really special about that. I love when you can actually even see the thumbprints. Sometimes they'll leave certain filmmakers will kind of leave those in. And I love that. And it's just so creative and a real real it really feels like art when you're watching it.
Yeah, like going back to the Toy Story analogy, it really does feel like it's bringing toys coming to life. In fact, I
Yeah.
remember when I talked to one of the creators of Robot Chicken, and he told me that it's kind of like that's the spirit of the show and the spirit of stop motion. It's kind of like the feeling that you would get when you would play with your toys, but then you see come to life on their own.
Hmm. Yeah. And I had the chance, if you want to check out on Rotoscopers, I had the chance way back 2018 to interview Nick Park, and that was
Oh.
unbelievable. Yeah. And to hear about the process of what goes into making one of these films, and obviously he's a legend, and just what they do is just I just love it. So yeah, I'll put a link down if people want to check that out. So I actually have eight stop motion in my top 50. And so I have two on this list that were bonuses that aren't in my top 50. But let's get started. What do you have at number 10?
Well, again, keep in mind, I'm not doing like a 10 to 1 thing. I'm
Oh
doing
yeah.
it in my alphabetical order. The first one I got is Anomalisa. One
Mm,
movie that honestly, like, it was big during award season. Like, I
yeah.
remember back in, technically 2016, when it was a major contender for Best Animated Feature next to Inside Out. I adore Inside Out, and it definitely deserved all those wins. But I could see how Anomalisa is a very strong contender. This is an animated movie that is actually brought to us by Charlie Kaufman, who is known, who's not normally known as an animation person, but he is an auteur in his own right, especially
Yeah.
with bringing us movies like Being John Malkovich. And seeing his style being implemented into animation is honestly very fascinating. And I would say even admirable, where it is a very solid argument of why we should have some more live action directors or people who are mostly known for live action so that they
Yeah.
could come in and make an animated feature, because this is a great piece. It's a
Yeah,
lot
I
more
would love to see that. I would love to see like just really unexpected people's take on animated film. That would be
exactly. And
fun.
like yeah, and even on like even this list, we do have some examples of that.
Yeah.
But going back to Anomalisa, it's a very fascinating tale. Like, of course, adult oriented, which can often be very rare for animation, or at least like mainstream animation.
Hmm.
It's about like it's basically about this author that he's really down on his life, but then stumbles upon this girl that he suddenly falls in love with. I mean, technically, yeah, back at his place, like he has a wife, he has a kid, and like that. But he was clearly not happy with how things are going with his life, whether it be as an auteur, or as an author. I mean, as a family man. There's just like so much about it that is just not working out. But then suddenly he sees this girl, and like for him, everything has changed. And this is one of the better examples of a movie that really can be artistic. Because one thing that is so fascinating is the fact that other than the main character and the girl he falls in love with, everyone else has the same face. Everybody else has the same voice, has the same face. Everybody is just basically this extra that is kind of insignificant in his life. And there are even times when it becomes self-aware that it is stop motion. Sometimes you enter into those dream sequence
Mm,
in which Michael suddenly he feels like he's in this massive dilemma that he doesn't know what to do. Should he pursue falling in love with this girl, or should he continue with his regular life? And then suddenly, like that's when like the whole suddenly like the entire movie realizes like, oh yeah, it's a stop motion film. There was even a point where even Michael literally drops his face. Like suddenly you see his face come off, and then like he has to go and pick it back up. So there is a lot of artistry and visual metaphors where again, this is a great example of the kind of filmmaking that you would expect from Charlie Kaufman, that is someone who is who, like he definitely has something to say in terms of life itself, and even life as a writer, but also someone who makes his projects be aware of the kind of films that they would be. And it's something that you would see in his other works as well. Even recently, he actually wrote a movie for DreamWorks Animation called Orion in the Dark, and that
yeah.
is a film like safe to say a lot more family oriented than Anomalisa,
Yes.
but it is a film that's also very self aware of what it is, where you even have periods where you kind of like enter into his mind a bit, and it goes very meta. I think that's probably the word that I've
Yeah.
been that I'm looking for to really describe Charlie Kaufman's style, is that it's also very meta, and he implements
Hmm.
that very very well on Anomalisa to present this this
Yeah.
conflicting love story, to
Yeah.
put it best.
It's very unique, and so I can totally see why it's on your list. And it's refreshing to have something so just different for in the world of animation. Sometimes I wish that the adult animated films didn't always feel the need to be like adult, like that we
Yeah,
could
going
just
that
y-
you mean go in that sausage party direction of
yeah,
like, let's be raunchy,
yeah,
titties,
and this is
pussy.
pretty adult with a big A. And I mean that's fine. I'm not like offended by that. It would be nice if we also got like a whole spectrum, if we had,
Mhm.
and there have been, I guess, a few, something like Flea, or there have been some that aren't like hard R's, but like our adult themes. There have been some, but I wish there were more. I wish there was like that people were using the medium in sort of more interesting ways than like for families or like not for families, if that makes sense. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's an
or
interesting
like
one.
something to or like movies that would take themselves seriously, because like
Yeah.
generally animated films, especially like R-rated films, they lean more into the comedy and try to be like very edgy with the stuff that they do. But
Yeah.
in the in the case of Anomalisa, this is a great example of an animated film that can take itself seriously, and even in terms of handling the mature tones and some of the more adult subject matter like sex and stuff like that,
Yeah.
it knows how to handle it in a way that
Yeah.
it feels intellectual. It feels like it
Hmm.
has something to say more so than just to make people laugh.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if I'm doing mine by alphabetizing, my number one is actually The Adventures of Prince Ahmed would be my number one. And I think if I was going to, if somebody came to me and said, Rachel, what's a good idea for a movie? I think somebody should make a movie about Lottie Reninger and her story. I think it is fascinating, and people don't know about her. And I think you could do some really cool things where you could weave in her artistry. You could have like flights of fancy with the animation, and then tell her story about how she got all of these people together in the 20s in Germany, and that people don't know that she made full feature films, animated films before Snow White, before these, and I think Ahmed is my favorite of her movies. I kind of debated, is it stop motion, is it not stop motion, because it's the paper, so it's not like a puppet. But we decided to include it. It's really cool if you ever get a chance to see one of her films in we have are very blessed here in Utah. There is a theater that it's an old theater that has an old silent movie organ, and you can go and see silent films with the actual organ playing, and the organ actually surrounds the whole room. The pipes are all over. It's really cool. And so if you ever get a chance to see any of Lottie Reninger's films in actual theater, it's a very cool experience. And yeah, I mean, this is just all about the artistry. It's a classic story of Aladdin, and basically, um, and but the what she does with the paper and the colors and everything is just unbelievable.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is a very historically significant animated feature. I mean, we are technically talking about the oldest living animated feature
Yeah,
ever created, and honestly, I completely forgot about the like technically the 2D stop motion animated features. I would have honestly included that one, and I mean, there are definitely plenty of others that are worth mentioning, including
yeah,
uh René Lelou's Fantastic Planet, for example. But when it comes to the Adventures of Prince Ahmed, yeah, it definitely is a very enchanting feature because this is actually one of the very rare movies that it tells a classic fairy tale, which in this case is that it's not just Aladdin, but it takes like a set of other stories of 1001 Nights and is actually adapted in a way that actually stays true to those classic stories. And from there, the magic of those classic stories is also brought into the Adventures of Ahmed. But at the same time, the fact because of the fact that it has such unique animation, the fact that it uses like like this shadow puppetry like stop motion of getting like these black cardboard cutouts to present their character, it may it adds this sense of timelessness. It adds this sense that it's the kind of movie that you cannot get this kind of experience anywhere else. It because there's an element where it feels like whenever like whenever there's like a lot of black going on, that you would fill in the rest to know like what would be the colors of all this, what would be like to show like what the whole thing is going on. So it's like you also play a part into adding into the artistry of all this. But this is not to say that like the artistry isn't complete in the Adventures of Prince Ahmed, because the puppets that craft like the all the like the cutouts of all the different characters, like it is enchanting. It is beautifully crafted. When you look at how all the different characters and especially the backgrounds, how they were built or how they were like cut out and how they were crafted, especially with the ancient Middle Eastern theming, it's just,
Yeah.
like it's amazing. They captured that beautifully well. So again, this is very much a one of a kind animated feature that very rarely you would ever see anyone else do it, or if anyone else is willing to do that
Yeah.
kind of animation. But what Lot Reininger has done with this feature is it's amazing. And
Yeah.
honestly, I just want to say right now, out of all the animated movies out there, I feel like this is the one that so far it is the most deserving to be added to the Criterion collection. I think that's
Yeah. I
that like
agree.
they need to go add
Yeah.
in like a whole bunch of bonus features to highlight the legacy
Mhm.
of Law Reininger. I mean, they did the same thing with the Blu-ray of Fantastic Planet. I think
Yeah.
like Ahmed deserves that as well.
Yeah. I agree. What do you think of my idea, making a Lottie Reniger movie?
Oh hell yeah!
Yeah, right? It would be so good.
I would love to see more biographical films based on animators. Like
Yeah.
honestly, that needs to be more of a thing. Like I was so disappointed when hearing that. Well, there have been plans to do some kind of like termite terrace movie with with the Looney Tunes guys like Chuck Jones, Frisk Freeling,
Oh,
Bob
that'd be
Henson,
good.
and all those guys, but like it never really
Yeah.
worked out. Like honestly, I would totally be down, and I would be the first to
Yeah.
advocate. We need more biographies based on
Yeah.
animators.
Because I think sometimes the best like biopics can be ones about people that we don't really know that much about, but are like important, as opposed to like, someone like Freddie Mercury. Everybody already like to me that's not as interesting. But yeah, and I even think now, Sandra Hüller, who was nominated for was in two movies this last year. They're nominated for Best Picture. Perfect. She would be like the perfect choice. Play Lottie.
Oh
Got
yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, like keep it. I mean, keep it. You're talking to the guy who makes animation look back. I do documentaries about
Yeah.
many of those people. I would love to see I would love
Yeah.
to see more movies about animators or
It
like
would
real
be.
life animators.
Yeah.
Hell, like even Ralph Bakshi is a great example. Like make a movie
Yeah.
about him. His life is crazy.
That's true. That's true.
Are you a fan of Rachel's Reviews? Do you look forward to Family Movie Night, Female Film Critics panels, or the Talking Disney podcast? If so, please consider supporting the podcast by becoming a Patreon. As a patron, you get to access monthly events such as the watch-alongs and Q&As, where you get to talk to stars and find out the behind the scenes of the movie making industry. And you can pick what I review for Family Movie Night or even become a guest on the podcast. Podcasts and YouTube channels are expensive, and I really, really could use your help. I would so appreciate it. You also get to be a member of the Facebook group where we talk about all the films that we're seeing, and we have so much fun. Go to patreon.com/hallmarkies and select one of the Rachel's fan tiers. That's patreon.com/hallmarkies.
What do you have next?
My next up, we're going to go to London, England, and we might be there a few times because I want to go and talk about Chicken Run.
Yeah, same.
Chicken
I have it
Run
next as
is,
well.
yeah, well, we might as well go and do it right. We might as well go and cover our thoughts on it right
Yes.
now. With Chicken Run, this is Aardman's first animated feature, and they started off amazingly because this is pretty much maybe not a satire, but more of a parody of prison escape
Yeah.
films, where they show where like you take the prison escape genre, but then you just have some extra fun with it by presenting chicken, where
Yeah.
it's basically chickens trying to escape. And like a lot of people have discussed about some of like the hidden theming within Chicken Run that does add an extra layer of fascination. Rather it be with like be environmental because of the way that animals are treated in these types of farms whenever they would go and produce food, or also a commentary on the workforce and workers' rights, especially when you got characters like Mrs. Tweedy, who's pretty much exploiting chickens for her own personal gain, but the chickens would have
Mm-hmm.
none of it. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, and there's a lot that you could read into this, like read between the lines, and you would be correct. But in here, I would say that Chicken Run kind of did what Wile E. Coyote, the Roadrunner, did to the genre of cartoons that they have done. They've kind of like what Chicken Run did is that they took that genre and like even it's a they actually did it so well that it kind of set a brand new standard to it. Because like it's not just about the escape that also makes it very fascinating to see how these chickens are going to get themselves out before things are too late. And Mrs. Tweedy would go and start mass producing her products with her chicken pies. And then it means far like, and the fate of these chickens would be doomed. But it's also getting to know many of these characters, getting to know characters like Ginger and Rocky and all the other chickens and roosters in the farm. You get to know them, and you start and like you emotionally connect with them, where it's not just the novelty of seeing like these crazy contraptions of how they would get themselves out, but it's also to be emotionally connected with them where you want to see them get out. You want to see them escape the farm and like be free and stuff like that. But then there's also a lot of their personal dilemmas, like their own personal stakes in the whole situation, while presenting these colorful characters, especially
Mm-hmm.
the arc with Rock. Now, I know like the liar trope has been used so many times, and some people could say that more often than not, it can be very tiring. But in this case, I feel like with the liar trope that Rocky has, it's actually very creative to the point where it like you see a big reveal of like his identity. It's both hilarious and tragic at the same time. Like honestly, like yeah, it's a film that like is effectively sad, but it's also very funny where like it is actually revealed that like oh he always promotes himself as a flying rooster, but then suddenly you get the bottom half of the poster and it's like oh that's how he flies.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, I think it
honestly
is
it
revealed well. Yeah, I love this movie. I watch it pretty much every year, or even though it's chickens and not turkeys, I just always watch it around Thanksgiving. It feels appropriate. And I so many funny lines. I don't want to be a pie. And then when she's knitting and
like
she
really.
knits the noose, and I mean just silly, silly, but very, very funny. And Mama Tweety's such a great villain, scary,
Oh yeah.
intimidating, and very well done. And so yeah, it's really, really, really good. My favorite from Aardman.
Oh yeah. I don't know if I would say my favorite from Marmon. We'll get to that soon. I actually
Oh.
have Marmon films on my list, but
Well,
not definitely a great feature.
if we're doing my true favorite, it would be the Wallace and Gromit shorts. I do
Ah,
those are at my actual favorite, but I enjoy the feature, but it would be an honorable mention for me. But yeah, it's my favorite of their features. But all right, well, next, this is actually number one for me. It's my favorite stop motion, but alphabetically, it's here. It's Coraline. I absolutely love
ah.
Coraline. The artistry, the imagery is so beautiful. And I really appreciate that's such a great way to introduce kids to horror and the tropes and the feeling. And I think if I was a parent, I would really want to introduce my kids to as many genres as possible and just see what they like, right? And I think this is a pretty scary movie for like little kids and even adults. And I think that that's nice, but I think that Coraline is such a great character because she has every reason to hate her parents. They are horrible at the beginning of the movie, and treat her terribly. So when she's presented with these seemingly perfect buttonized versions of her parents, like she has every reason to be sort of bamboozled by them. And maybe she is a little bit at the beginning, but when she has to make that decision, she chooses her real parents, flaws and all, and chooses to save them and chooses to help. And to me, that's a lot. Like, it's more interesting, I think, for characters to have to fight for flawed people than for like paragons, like the perfect mother or that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And so the fact that she doesn't really flinch that much when really presented with what she's going to do, and she has to fight for her family, even though they aren't very nice, at the beginning. And I really appreciate that. And the side characters are so fun. Those two aunts that live below, they're so nice, so fun, and I just love it. I think it's the cat I love. It's just great.
Yeah, yeah, like a lot of these it's funny how with stop motion it's often common that you would see the gateway horror that or light
Yeah,
family friendly horror that they would enter upon that because they're like it's agreeable that sometimes it can be that like, there is a bit of that creepy factor when it comes to stop motion because these are technically living dolls that move around in unnatural ways. Like that can be interpreted. And there are some movies that they would go and take advantage of that. And Coraline is a wonderful example of that. Taking the novel by Neil Gaiman and just bring it to life in an unnatural way that really works out beautifully for this feature.
yeah,
Like yes, you do have that scare factor that it like in a way it's like a very dark Alice in Wonderland because you're transported into this magical and very whimsical world. It's like it's basically like a Fantasyland version of the reality that she would be living in. And there's like that one strange. It's like okay, everybody's got buttons for eyes. It's kind of weird, but okay, I could roll with it. But then suddenly, like slowly but surely, you see this whole place unveiling itself and that's when and that's where like things go horribly wrong and the real creep factor of like what this entire place is and it's like the animation safe to say it is very wonderfully crafted very very beautifully made and I believe this is the first animated feature that uses a 3D printer in order to go and create their
yeah,
puppets. And I believe, and technically, I do believe this is also the first animated movie from Laika in
yeah.
which it is
Official from Leica, because they had
yeah.
done work on um James the Giant Peach and on Nightmare Before Christmas, but this is the first like actual Leica. Yeah,
Well, I mean, maybe from the team, but not necessarily from the studio itself. Because
yeah,
keep in mind, beforehand, that studio was Will Vinton.
yeah.
Like it was the whole of Claymation, but then suddenly there was a whole legal battle against Phil
Right.
Knight, and then it got transformed into Leica. But still, what Leica
Yeah,
is doing right now, the stuff that they make is just absolutely incredible. There's even
yeah,
one other movie that I have in my list that is from Leica. Going back into Coraline, yeah, the animation is just absolutely extraordinary. Some like honestly, it shows how Leica is like one of the best studios to produce stop motion. Just
yeah,
wonderful. Then there's also the characters as well. Like rather be with Coraline herself, or also like when you have both versions of the characters and how contrast with one another, rather it be with YB, who's like who did not come from the books, like as a new character made for the movie, where like you would think that like okay, he seems like a bit of the annoying dumb kid, but actually does work out pretty well in this movie, and you like
hmm,
the opposite version or like the parallel version in that other world, the
yeah,
parents as well, and then also like how they would and like you also see like the transformation that they go through when Coraline sees the reality of what that other world is, and then you got the other mother, which I remember I did put on my list among one of the best animated plot twist
yeah.
villains. Like she just
So good.
fantastic and so like one of the most threatening animated villains that you would find. And like as the movie would progress, like the more you see the film, the more you see the other mother, the freakier she becomes. Like
Yeah.
almost like like almost like a mix of a broken China doll and a spider. Like when you see like
Yeah.
more and more of her ultimate form. And even funny enough, like her skeleton actually shows. And I don't mean like the skeleton like what we have in our. I mean like the skeleton in the stop motion puppets where you see like you
Mm.
see a bit of the mechanisms. Like her legs are actually like they're just like metal pieces, and even like
Yeah.
her hand when it gets cut off, it's like it's all metal pieces as well. You do have a bit of that meta nature as well, but still with Coraline, it's it's a great film, and definitely one of the rare examples of animated horror. I mean, it's very light horror, but still great horror
Pretty scary,
nonetheless.
yeah. And I also should say that 2009, I think, is pretty clearly, I think, the greatest year ever for animation. I have four movies from that year, including Coraline, on this list alone, let alone Up, Secret of the Kells, Princess and the Frog. I mean, it was stacked, a stacked year. But yeah, Coraline. I think any other year, I think I would have had a really good shot of winning. But
Oh
that
yeah.
year was intense. But
Yeah.
what do you have next?
Well, technically, my next one would have been Coraline, but I guess we've already covered that.
Mm,
My next up that I have here is Fantastic Mr. Fox, and we're
same.
going back to that. Yeah, we're going back to that exam. Yeah, we might have like a lot of similarities on our list. But anyways, back to Fantastic Mr. Fox. This is another example of taking a live action tour, and you see what happens. You take what he would do, you take his filmmaking style and how he would go and adapt it onto an animated feature.
Yeah,
And Wes Anderson is a very, very unique auteur with the type of films that he would go and create, rather it be with stuff like of Steve Zissou, or you got get like later on like with the Grand Budapest Hotel. Like he has a very distinct style
yeah,
that is very it's very monotone, but it has this simple artistry that is admirable, and it actually does adapt very well with animation. And although it is a surprise with something like stop motion, it actually does work out to be very beneficial. And in the case of Fantastic Mr. Fox, it's a very charming flick where even though the voice that's telling the whole story is undeniably Wes Anderson, the spirit of the original book by Roald Dahl is still highly present. That this is still the story about these little woodland creatures and how they're trying to survive this industrialist world, especially when their literal neck of the woods is actually dominated by is it Bonds, Bunsen, and Bean? Or I'm trying to remember their
oh, those,
names.
yeah, the farmers.
Yeah, the three
Yeah.
farmers.
Hmm.
And yeah, and like you do have that element of whimsy, but also you have that very subdued nature that makes it easy to connect with all characters. And the way that the way that all the animals are presented, that you see that uh, the animals are living exactly like how we would live in this regular neighborhood, but it's actually very nice,
Yeah.
and also again very well crafted, where you have kind of like I guess you could say, like, I know this is like a gamer term. This is a 2.5D animated feature where everything is it's almost like a Peanuts movie, actually, since we've talked about that before, where like it feels like the entire image is flat because all the like the camera is straightforward in terms of the cinematography, where you see like it's directly facing in front of a wall, or the characters, they either look straight into the camera or they go straight 90 degrees on the other side of the camera. But with this but with this filmmaking style, it adds to the emotional core. It adds onto looking directly onto the characters, looking to their emotions to see how they feel, and it works out very well. It makes it very charming. In fact, I would even say it enhances the charm of the feature, and not to mention the
Mm-hmm.
acting. The acting is so a
Yeah.
wonderful thing in this feature,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you got this big all-star cast like with
Yeah.
George Clooney, Meryl Streep,
Mm-hmm.
Bill Murray, and several others.
Yeah.
Overall, it just makes this wonderful animated film. And again, another example of what happens when you bring live action filmmakers into the world of animation and how they can
Mm-hmm.
integrate their style on the medium to give us something fresh, to give us something new, something that we've never seen in other animated films before.
Yeah, I really enjoy this one. I'm a bit mixed on Wes Anderson. I love the Budapest Hotel. I like Moonrise Kingdom a lot. I love this. I liked Isle of Dogs, but some of his I don't really connect with me. I don't, it's just like style over substance sometimes for me. But I didn't love Asteroid City, for instance, last year. But
Okay.
this one I do love, and I especially love the world building. I mean, it is a beautiful movie to watch, and just all the little attention to detail, and again, I love in the when you could see like even thumbprint, in certain scenes and stuff like that. Like, to me, that's what makes this medium real special. So my next one is was maybe my favorite movie from not last year, but year before, 2022. I
Okay.
absolutely loved Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. I
Ah,
loved this movie so much. I loved following Marcel and his journey to find his family and his relationship with his grandma and his friendship with Dean, the documentary, quote unquote, as the movie progresses.
well, technically the
And
actual directors.
yeah, yeah, actual director. I just loved it. I thought it was so good and so clever the way that he creates all these different ways to kind of move around. And so it was fun to watch. I'd never seen the shorts, so it was a new character for me. And yeah, it's a favorite.
No, I actually do have that on my list as well.
Oh, okay.
This is
And
like I
I was
yeah.
thinking, did you review it when it came out? I was thinking you didn't for some reason.
No, I didn't. I didn't, but I
Yeah.
remember like we talked about it before, and you actually convinced me to check it, especially with the fact
Oh,
that
good.
it got nominated at the Oscars, and oh my God, I would say during that year is the absolute feel good
Yeah.
movie of that year. It is it is very charming. I love how it presents this mock documentary style where we just look into the life of Marcel the Shell with shoes on and see how how they almost like semi autobiographical in a way where we see how did Marcel become a viral sensation, because like it's
Yeah.
almost true to reality, because the like Marcel started out as a bunch of short films uploaded on YouTube, and they kind
Hmm.
of like really grew into a life of
Yeah.
its own. So,
And there's so
so,
many
so
ways that the movie could have been cringe, but I think it
mhm.
avoids all those minefields. In my opinion, I just think it's so it just gets that tone perfect. And I love Jenny Slate as Marcel, so good.
Yeah, no, she was fantastic in that. What's also very fascinating is that honestly, like it's unconventional and unorthodox, but like it's fascinating to see how the movie completely stops when Marcel has to go and take care of his grandma. Like suddenly
Yeah,
the
it
whole movie has
changes.
to take a massive pause because her grandma is not in the best condition, and now he has to dedicate his life in taking care of his grandma. Like she has to take the top priority, and I feel
Hmm.
like that is something that I feel like is very true to life, because
Yeah.
like even my family, like with my mom, with my aunts and uncles, that their life also kind of had to shift recently because they got to go and take care of my grandma
Yeah.
because, well, she doesn't really have that much to live considering her very old age at this point.
Yeah.
But like, it's honestly very fascinating. And like, I just watched this and like, just felt amazed because it's like, oh my God, like I don't see Marcel anymore. I see my mom taking care of my grandma. So there is kind of like that
Yeah.
element of reality that
Yeah, it has a lot
really
of
does.
different spots where you can connect with it. And I love the fact that she has a foreign accent because she's from the garage.
Yeah. Oh, that is true. That like, yeah, basically you make an entire, yeah, like the house is an entire world
Yeah.
basically with their tiny stature. So yeah, of course, like
So
you could
good.
have different dialects for the different places. Oh yeah, that
Yeah.
that that definitely is good. But
Yeah.
yeah, I will say that everything, like what really does work is that the focus is primarily on Marcel, his life, and his relationship with not just his grandmother but also with Dean as well.
Yeah.
Like basically trying to find, and especially with the search of whatever happened to the rest of his family when the previous owners of the house went through this bitter divorce and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So
Which
it
is
just
interesting because Jenny and Dean went through a divorce while making the movie. So I think that kind of adds also a layer, like the very filmmakers itself, we're going through this,
you
which
mean
is,
Jenny Slade?
mhm. Yeah, they were
Oh,
married.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
And while it was because it took them like 10 years to make, and it took a long time. And yeah, they went through a divorce while the movie was making, which is kind of interesting. But yeah.
Ah.
Hey, this is David from the Piecing It Together podcast, a podcast about movies and the movies that inspire them. For over 4 years each week, a guest and I take a look at a new movie through the lens of what other movies we think were either an influence or connect in some other way. It's a fun, unique way to discuss films that leads to a great list of other movies to check out that either explore the same themes and ideas or maybe utilize similar filmmaking techniques. Including special episodes in our side series that twist the format, we've done over 200 episodes, so there's bound to be one on a film you've been thinking about and want to dig deeper into. So check us out on all the major podcasting apps and at piecingpod.com.
Well, my next up, this is actually my personal favorite movie of 2024. It's Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio.
Yeah.
Now, this one, it went through something. It went through a similar production history that's like Nimona, where this was a production that Guillermo del Toro wanted to make for over a decade. It was kind of like a passion project, and he wanted to use that as kind of like his major gateway into animation, considering his devoted love for the medium.
Yeah.
But it never really went through, especially kind of like this unconventional idea of this stop motion Pinocchio movie set in World War II. Like, it's hard to imagine how any other studio would like want to go and try to legitimately produce this. So it became like for a long time, it became one of the many projects that people were very much anticipating for from Guillermo del Toro, but never came to be. Like it ended up on the similar list to like Justice League Dark, At the Mountain of Madness, his adaptation of The Haunted Mansion, and several others. But then suddenly Netflix came in and decided to save the production, to bring it to life. Oh God, I am so glad they did, because this really is one of my favorite stop motion animated films. And I would even say the best adaptation of Pinocchio that we've gotten since the Walt Disney version back in 1940.
No question.
And a big part of it is that like it is an adaptation of Pinocchio, but at the same time, it takes a lot of the concepts and really flips it upside down to really become this anti-fascist movie that speaks out against the Nazi regime and any other fascist or authoritarian regime and politics and stuff like that, like really speaking out against it. And one way that it does is that it actually goes against the morals of Pinocchio, where it shows the pros and cons of disobeying. Because like the original Carlo Collodi story is pretty much straightforward, saying like bad things are going to happen to you if you keep on lying and you keep on disobeying. But with Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, yeah, it shows a lot of the downsides and like where things can go wrong if you would obey or if you would go and lie. But in here, but what it also does is that it shows the benefits, why it is actually a good thing to go and disobey and to ask questions about this, to go against the status quo. It shows what can there be some benefits of even lying as well, like kind of like really makes you rethink about those types of classic morals that you would be told again and again when you're kids. The only small criticism that I would have, just it didn't have to be a musical. Like there were times when it would try, like it would implement some songs and stuff like that. But I feel like it's not that much of a priority. Like if it didn't focus on stuff like that, and also the songs aren't that really that memorable. Like if it didn't really have any of that, this would have easily been the best animated feature we would have in recent years. Like it is that amazing, and especially not just like with a beautifully crafted story, which I believe Patrick McHale of Over the Garden Wall actually had some assistance. I think he is at least one of the writers on that.
Yeah.
But not to mention also like the character designs as well. That was inspired by the art style of Grish Grimley. That has a very similar macabre-like look that is comparable to Tim Burton. Everything works out well. Like the animation is beautiful. The story, like I said, really knows how to bring the Pinocchio story to a whole new level while having a great message to say that actually very relevant nowadays. And also the characters are extremely charming. Like it makes you fall in love with these characters all over again. And I'll even admit it's one of the rare movies nowadays that I watched it and at the end it made me cry. Like, oh my god, like at that ending there, it was like bittersweet to the point that it brought me to tears.
I'm like that. See, that's a bad metric for me because I like cry at television ads. I'm like the easiest cry of any human being. I'm like Public Waterworks. You can get me so easy, but yeah, I totally. I love this. If I had an 11 when I added Prince Achman, it bumped this one off of my list, but I do love it. I think it's wonderful, and it was such a relief after that horrible Disney Pinocchio to get this. I mean,
God.
what a blessing.
Or the other one that may probably caused its fame, maybe. You know that other one.
Oh wow. But yeah, it's wonderful. I do think they spend a little bit too much time in the war section. I kind of like, okay, let's move on. But I really did enjoy it. I thought it was beautiful. I love the animation, the story, the message, that tries to talk about death and that it allows. I mean, it was definitely your generational trauma, is a theme for the last decade of animated films, and that was one. When Geppetto says that to Pinocchio, like, I wish that you were what's his name, and I mean, it's Carlo, and I mean it's rough. Like Geppetto,
well, then again, like I would argue that kind of like a reverse generational trauma, because like the one who got the most trauma, more so than Pinocchio, would be Geppetto because of his son's death.
But like having to forgive your parents, I think, is like a kind of theme of these generational trauma. And that's definitely something that like Pinocchio has to do. He has to like forgive his father for saying this, very mean thing to him. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, he's put under a lot of pain and that he has to deal with. So there's not only sort of the broader geopolitical, things it's trying to say, but it's also about grief and loss and and how you move on from that. How do you live with this just hole in your heart, So
that is true.
It was rough. That scene, it got me. Well, my next one is maybe obscure, I don't know, but I love it. It's also from 2009. It's Mary and Max. And this is a charming. I love stories about friendship, and that's always going to be a favorite. And this is a wonderful story about a friendship between this like grumpy old autistic man and this little girl who's writing him letters, and their friendship. And they're both odd. They both don't fit in. They both have a hard time relating to people, and but they connect with each other over these letters, and it's just wonderful. I love it in the black and
Yeah,
white style.
yeah, I will admit it's been quite a while that I have seen Miriam Max. But I will say though, that it is, it definitely is a very heartfelt and charming movie. But also, like, I know it definitely has a lot of fans, especially with the fact that this actually has like, especially in animation, this has the very rare representation of a character in the autism spectrum.
Yeah.
And I am aware that there is a good amount of animation fans who are also on the autism spectrum. So there is something with Max that they can truly relate. And it's basically these two characters that they're from two different parts of the world, and that they're very much down on their luck because of like the situation, the whatever situations they have in their lives that that has been going on, rather it be with Max or with Mary, who's not living, not living with the best parents out there. So it's basically how they depend on each other to go through their lives, and getting their letters where they go, where they keep going back and forth and help other out in their own personal situations. Like even when things go amazingly great, like with Max, for example, where he ended up, I believe it was like winning the lottery or something like that.
Yeah.
Like suddenly he won big, but there's also like some detriments as well, in regards to like, okay, does he really know what to do with all that money and stuff like that? So from there, it's basically a more simple movie that manages to really focus a lot on art. It does so very well.
Yeah. Well, what do you have next?
Oh, my next up. Well, I actually do have another Wes Anderson movie. It's Isle of Dogs. And this one, I would argue, is a very underrated feature. I felt like it was a great movie that unfortunately did not get enough attention that I feel like it honestly deserves, because I feel like it is around the same level as Fantastic Mr. Fox, especially when you do have that same style of cinematography, that same style of craftsmanship that Wes Anderson would go and put in. But this time around, you got a more unique story where you have like these dogs that are looking out for each other, going through life and like helping out this kid who wants to find his own dog. And it also has like this very impressive world building of like, what happens if dogs only have each other? Like, what if they're suddenly stuck in their own little corner and they have to create their own civilization? And not only that, but like this is also a movie that has their own great, a lot of great memorable moments. In fact, like I remember in the opening where like when you have like the main characters fight off against another group of dogs, and they have to double check on the bag to see like if anything is like, if it is it worth fighting for. And they're like, hold it. Do we know what's even in this bag? Like, can we check out like if there's anything in there that's worth it? And then like the other team is like, okay, they check. Then they just check in. It's like, okay, let's see. Yeah, we got crap. Okay, it's worth it. And then immediately cut to them fighting, like with the cartoon clown and stuff. It's just a wonderful. Honestly, it's a great movie with a lot of great world building, a lot of great characters. Like it's really the kind of film where you really get immersed with like what is going on, especially with this alternate universe with show a different kind of relationship between people and with dogs as well. And the reason why I keep saying that it should be more popular than it should have more attention, that and also a very underrated movie, is the like the one thing that keeps it away from like being as popular as it should be is the fact that it was released in 2018. And we all know in 2018 there was one movie that hogged all the attention from every other animated feature. And that's because of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I mean, we've talked about the movie and it's a great film. But it unfortunately really took a lot of the spotlight away from all the other films at that time, including Isle of Dogs, which I personally feel like it's unfortunate. Honestly, like it should, like, Spider-Verse, I feel like deserves a lot of the credit that it has got, it gotten. But honestly, at the expense of other animated movies, like, I just feel like that's like one of the unfortunate things about it.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, my favorite set piece, I guess, in that movie is that there's like I'm not sure if it's a room or a cave, I can't remember, but that where there's a whole wall of glass bottles that the characters stand in front of, and that was just so beautiful, all the colors and the attention to detail. You just think about all the little things and all of there's one where they're in front of like a panel of like a cabinet, and you see all the little items, like in there. Just it's so fun. It's so fun. And yeah, I enjoy that one as well. Next up, I have The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Oh.
Yes. And so yeah, this one, I mean, it's classic for so many things. It's kind of like, it's always hard when something becomes so iconic that it can become kind of like a meme in a bad sense, that people are like, oh, that again, kind of a thing. But like, if you go back to the actual movie, it's like, it's obviously, I mean, I'm a Christmas person, so I love, Christmas stories, but what I think is more interesting about the movie is that you have a character who is trying to be something that he's not. And there's just nothing more toxic in life than trying to be something that you're not, trying to live something that you're not, trying to put on a facade. And it's horrible. And Sally can see that from the very beginning, that this is not going to end well for Jack. And he does it with such enthusiasm. He's so excited about it because it's so different. But it's fun to try new things, but also it's just important to not lose ourselves, in that we have to remember that, like, we're valuable for who we are, and that we trying to be somebody else that we see. I remember as a kid, that there was this group of kids that I saw as like, these were like the good kids. Like, I should be friends with them. They're like, they get good grades. They're like, and so I started like sitting next to them. And I think my friends were like, what is she doing? Why is she over there? And they weren't like unkind. They were fine. They weren't mean or anything, but they just weren't, it just wasn't a fit. Didn't have that chemistry. And after a couple of days, I'm like, this is stupid. And so then I went and just went back to my friends. And I just think so many times in life we try to do that. It's like we see something that we think is like better for whatever reason, right? Like he sees Christmas Land, this is better. And how, that's oftentimes not the case. So I do love it. And the Danny Elfman, the songs are so great.
Yeah, I mean, with The Nightmare Before Christmas, debatably, it is the most popular stop motion feature of all time, or
no question,
even the most famous stop motion project, period. Especially with the way that Disney is kind of treating it as their go-to Halloween project. I mean, like, nowadays they got a little bit more variety of that. Like if you go to Halloween when they would open, like, you kind of get, I guess, the holy trinity of Disney Halloween with The Nightmare Before Christmas, Hocus Pocus, and the Haunted Mansion. But the main one, the big one, is The Nightmare Before Christmas.
What's the last one you said?
The Haunted Mansion.
Oh, Haunted Mansion.
More and more like they're really showing off that ride. Like, it's not the movie, not any of the movies. It's really like the ride. But anyways, back to The Nightmare Before Christmas. It's funny how this all started out as like Tim Burton's twisted version of the Rankin Bass holiday specials that he wanted to put in his own macabre twist. And in a way, this is like one of the first major examples of the Tim Burton style that you see Tim Burton as a full-on artist, not just as a filmmaker. This is the one that really does exemplify the look. I mean,
even though he didn't direct it, And people,
well,
so many people think because it was Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yes, I know that. I
feel so bad for Henry Selick because it's got to suck.
No, yeah. I know. I understand that. I'll get back into that. I just want to finish my point with the Tim Burton thing. That even though you do get a little taste of that in some of his earlier works as well, like the Batman movies or Pee-wee's Big Adventure. But with The Nightmare Before Christmas, that's when his art style is fully recognized. And yes, even though he's just the producer, Tim Burton would technically be the creator, where he came up with the concept and he's the producer. But it is true that the real director, the one who actually created the movie itself, is indeed Henry Selick. Honestly, one of the top dogs in stop motion, and the work that he did is, it's great. The way that he is able to go and combine both the whimsy and the macabre, that he's able to there was a little bit of a period that it didn't work out that greatly for him, especially with Monkey Bone, but he was able to come back from it. Especially with what we've already talked about with Coraline, and even not too long ago with Wendell and Wild, which honestly I personally find to be pretty underrated.
I was disappointed by it, but it was nice to see him back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But with The Nightmare Before Christmas, though, it definitely is a fun feature and very admirable in terms of its originality, way that it successfully combines both the theming of Halloween and Christmas, where you can enjoy it at either times.
Yeah.
I will admit, though, I didn't include it onto my list because my one criticism with it is that I feel like it is too short, down to the point where the story does feel very rushed. Everything just goes by so quickly, to the point that it feels like one of those movies that it kind of finishes before you would even realize, especially with the fact that I think it's just 70 minutes long. I personally feel like the movie would have benefited if you add 10 or 20 minutes, make it an 80 or 90-minute feature to go and add in some details, to go and have a bit more explanation, especially what are Oogie Boogie's motives and stuff like that. Personally, I feel like they shouldn't have taken away that deleted scene where it was actually a plot twist where Oogie Boogie is actually Dr. Finkelstein, because he's just so fed up of Sally's shenanigans. But anyway, that's just me. But still, though, it is an iconic animated feature and definitely a wonderful one.
Yeah.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, Hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/hallmarkies.
For me, I actually have another Leica film. I'm going with Kubo and the Two Strings. This film absolutely amazed me. This is a film that in a way goes into a lot of Japanese mythology, but really bring it to a whole new level, and in a very admirable way that is also original. This is a film that is just bursting with creativity, where you see a whole bunch of different monsters that Kubo and some of the other characters have to face some fantastic action that is implemented, especially with the abilities of the other characters, like with Kubo and how he can bring like little pieces of paper to life. Especially the use of origami in the animation is just beautiful. Then you also have the monkey that is more like that has more wisdom and maybe a bit of kung fu as well.
Yeah.
And then you also have the beetle with his several arms. Also acts a bit like a samurai. But then there's also like this is another feature that goes into the light horror aspect as well, where it does add some suspense and it also adds into the fear factor where like there is legitimate creepiness. Like I believe like the two girls, like I think it's like Kubo's like I think it's Kubo's aunts, like oh my god they freak me out every time like they slowly appear, and especially like showing their skills where they are dedicated to go and get Kubo. Like they are an absolute threat along with many of the other monsters and many of the other foes that they have to go and face. And along the journey, you also get to learn about the origin of Kubo's family, where they come from, and some of the powers that they actually do hold and where they would go and get it. And I feel like with each of that, it actually it actually presents that extremely well. And on top of that, it even has a theme of the power of storytelling, because at the beginning you see Kubo, he is a storyteller where he uses his powers with origami to go and tell stories to people. But then he would go and experience a major story in his like himself, and how that power of storytelling can go and help out on his adventure and even face some of his foes. So honestly, like with Kubo, I'm kind of like I would even consider this an underrated feature as well. Like honestly,
Yeah.
it was one of my favorite animated movies that came out that year back in 2016. Where that was another extremely banger of a year for animated films, especially like with Disney bringing out both Zootopia, Moana, and
Yeah.
like you got several other major films, but Kubo is an absolute underdog and such a wonderful feature
Yeah.
film.
And I love Kubo so much as a character. He was so endearing. And I made me so mad when they wanted to blind. I'm like, oh
Oh,
no, like that's was such a like you just felt such concern for the character at that moment. I think they did a very good job with Kubo, I think, as a character in that movie. Well, my next one is Paranorman, is where I'm next.
ah,
I love this movie. I love the bond that again. I love stories about friendship and the bond that Norman makes with because he's an oddball. He doesn't fit in, and here's this girl from the like Puritan times that's put this curse on everybody because she's angry because she also doesn't fit in, and it's kind of an interesting thing because it sort of takes that sort of bullied mentality to this sort of toxic place where she wants revenge. She wants to make people feel how she felt, and so he has to kind of talk to her and help her to see out of this. And I think that's really lovely and well done. And I love all the side characters are so funny. Even his sister is hilarious. And it's genuinely kind of scary at times. I think it's another good one if you wanted to introduce your kids to horror, give them a feel for a lot of these tropes. I think it's scary. It's maybe too scary for some kids, but I just really think it's a great zombie movie. And I love the animation, and so it's one I think it's actually a little underappreciated, but I love it.
yeah, I
So
will admit that I didn't really have that on my list, but I will say that like it is still a very solid film, and I feel like it is one that like the more it progresses, the it actually gets, the more like everything reveals itself and like
Yeah.
what actually happened, like in terms of like the history and stuff like that. And like as you see it, like it starts out like what you would expect from a typical like what you expect from a family friendly zombie movie. But then suddenly over time, like suddenly like the more you learn about what actually happened in history, the more like it really opens up. Like not only with the message about like not only having a commentary on historic revisionism, but also suddenly like when Norman does confront the actual witch, that's when like the move like that whole scene is just absolutely incredible. The whole design of the area, going into this supernatural world, the witch herself, yeah, like well, technically the witch character herself. Suddenly, you see who she is and the powers that she has, and not to mention blending in every form of animation that you could think. Like you got the base of like stop motion, but then there's also additional effects of like CG being used, like for the lightning, and then there's even some hand drawn that's being integrated, especially like when you see her face being like continuously stretched out. Like
Yeah,
that,
that's true.
and especially even in terms of like the character dynamic with Norman trying to connect with the witch, like with that scene, like it really does get so intense. Like to
Yeah.
see this is the ultimate moment, like to really go and save the day, but you never know. It's like, and it feels like a delicate balance. Like you got to make sure that he does it right, or else like everything is just gonna blow itself up. But yeah, like that, like I will say that scene alone is like one of the best stop motion movies one of the stop motion moments that you would find in an animated movie. So yeah,
Yeah.
like definitely a solid picture, but that scene in particular is, oh my God, that is incredible.
So what do you have next?
For me, what I have next, well, technically we've already talked about Marcel on. We've already got that covered. But the next one I have is a Shaun the Sheep movie, Farmageddon. Yes, I'm actually going with the second film. And just out of curiosity, have you seen that film?
Yes, I love it. And I have Shaun the Sheep OG on my list, but I do love Farmageddon too, and I think it is a very satisfying sequel. And I love the design of that little alien; is adorable.
Yeah. Like the funny thing with Farmageddon is that on the surface, you wouldn't necessarily think that much. This is like this is like the Shaun the Sheep version of ET, and in some ways, it kind of is. But it really is through its unique storytelling that manages to work out so well. It is first and foremost, it's a silent film, so like nobody really does talk. So it's the animators are mainly in charge of the storytelling, and also with with presenting the characters with their emotions and like. So already the fact that they were able to go and make that kind of silent movie work out, like already that deserves bonus points. But also another thing that really puts it to the top is the comedy. Like I would say this is one of the funniest animated movies you could find, or at the very least, one of the funniest stop motion films. This, like a lot of the gaps, like when they hit, oh my God, they hit extremely well. Rather it be with the dynamic between Sean and with Alien, or how the alien like interact, like finds new things with this world, or how the other sheep interact with the alien.
Yeah.
Or especially with the dog, or with the dog character, especially trying to put things back to normal. But yeah, honestly, it's just the comedy is also something that really makes it worth watching, and it just makes this completely fun experience. And not to mention with the animation that they really did go up and above that. like it's all like Shaun the Sheep already did fantastically well with the animation, whether it be on the farm like they would regularly show in the series, or even with the original movie where they would go into the big city. But in this one though, like they do have that extra layer of having that extraterrestrial theme and like play, you know, and have some new materials that they could go and play around with, rather it be with travel or having like the area be like hyped up in terms of aliens, or you would have like the Secret Service, or how the Secret Service would go and hide themselves from society and all the comical potential that they have. But yeah, honestly, I'm adding Shaun the Sheep movie. Debatably, like I know I've already hyped up the comedy, but I would say like probably Aardman's funniest animated feature that they have done, and also very sweet as well.
Well, I think that's part of the reason why I was pretty disappointed with Donna the Nugget, because Shaun the Sheep Farmageddon was so good, and it didn't just repeat the story of the first movie. Like it's a different, unique story, and so that's, I think, part of the reason why I thought that Aardman's gonna nail it in this other sequel, but you know it was watchable but disappointing. Whereas this
I'm with you on that.
Farmageddon was so creative, so funny, so sweet. Yeah, really love that. The first one I have on my list. I especially love the whole sequence where they go out to dinner in disguise, and they're out like, that is such a great scene, and it really captures the feeling of silent movie comedy, like a Chaplin, a Keaton, you know, that kind of feel, which you don't get that much today in movies. And I just love that. And then the whole thing with the farmer becoming like this viral hairdresser because he forgets his memory is so funny. And so yeah, great choice. And
you know what it is? It's not just classic silent movies, but it's also like the classic, like the mentality of classic cartoons as well. That it's not trying too hard in order to be funny. Like sometimes it goes into the old tricks of animation, like what cartoons used to do back in the old days, and they show like they could still work very well. They could still be able to bring some good laughs.
It's true. It's true. Well, my final one on my list. How many do you have left?
I only have one left.
Okay, we're the same. Okay, my final one on my list is maybe obscure. A lot of people probably haven't heard of it, but it's another one from 2009. It's a little movie called A Town Called Panic, and this is based on a television show, I guess, in France, I believe, or Belgium, and it's extremely silly. It won't be for everybody, but I love it. I think it's so funny. It's all taking toys and like telling a story based off these toys, but it's nothing like Toy Story. But it's so there's an old school like Indian toy and a cowboy toy and a horse toy, and they all live together and have these crazy things. And one of my favorite gags in the whole thing is that so horse meets girl horse at the beginning, and he's like, I'll come to your class or whatever it was, I can't remember, but they'll come to your thing. And she's like, no, you won't. Everybody always says that, and then they don't come. And he's like, I promise I'll come. And then throughout the whole rest of the movie, he keeps getting all these phone calls with her being like, he'll be like underneath the ocean, and there'll be a phone, and he's, it's so funny. And like I love it. So they're building like a grill kind of thing for Indian's birthday.
Or isn't it Horse's birthday?
Oh, is it Horse's birthday? I can't remember. But for the birthday, and Cowboy ends up ordering 50 million bricks instead of the 50 he's supposed to. So they just keep coming and coming and coming. He's like, what? And it's really funny. It's extremely silly. It won't be for everybody, but I really do love it. I think it's so funny.
Yeah, I will admit, A Town Called Panic is one of the most unexpected movies that like I ended up really enjoying. Like I would say the most surprising, one of the most surprising. Like I didn't expect that I would have this much fun. And it's funny because like like, because originally it's in French, but like not just with the accents of the character. Like I watched the French version, like the original French version, but I was watching it and I was curious. I didn't know if it was like if it was actually European. There was a part of me that thought like maybe this is French Canadian, because like
Mm.
not just with their accent, but even with the type of comedy, like
Yeah, I can
the
see that.
mannerisms and stuff. Like there was a part of me that was curious. It's like, is this made in Quebec? Are these like French
Yeah,
Canadian filmmakers?
I can see
But
that.
no, this was actually a lot of fun because it really does play a lot with absurdity. Like this is a film that does not take itself
Yeah,
seriously whatsoever and takes full advantage of it.
yeah,
Like really going into this nonsense, like going into this nonsensical direction and just like really make the most out of like expect the unexpected with this whole adventure while having like these characters you just have fun with. And in a way it kind of has a little bit of that Lego movie robot chicken style
yeah.
mentality of like this is basically playing with toys and just like winging it every single time, like with more scenarios that you could go and bring up. But yeah, yeah, it's definitely a fun movie with just but like yeah, it's very nonsensical, but it's just so much fun. And like from there it also makes it weirdly charming where you do
Yeah.
connect with the characters, like with cowboy or Indian or with horse and stuff like that.
It's
It's
true. It's
just
another friendship
yeah,
story when you think
yeah,
about it.
it's a friendship story.
Yeah.
Like oddly enough, like I don't know if you would know what I'm talking about, but it like I feel like something like that is kind of like the closest that we would get to a Star Runner movie. Like I feel like it almost has like kind of that same style.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that. I can see that. So what do you have? What's your last one?
So my final pick is Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. Now we've talked a little bit about Wallace and Gromit before, especially with the animated shorts. I mean, they are masterpieces in their
Yeah.
own right, highly enjoyable. With Curse of the Were-Rabbit, I feel like they were able to take what we love about these shorts and really bring it to a whole new level. And not to mention the fact that this is all like very similarly to what they've done with Chicken Run. They actually made itself a parody, but they kind of redefined that genre in a way, where this is a parody of classic horror. And I mean like the good
Yeah.
old days of the Universal horror
Yeah.
flicks, like with
True.
Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, and all that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. But they decided not to take themselves seriously and just be fully absurd, where instead of a werewolf tormenting this town, it's a were-rabbit that the lives that are threatened are actually the vegetables, especially when there's this big vegetable
Hmm.
competition that's happening in the town, and they want to
Hmm.
make sure that their prized veggie like is safe and make sure it's not harmed from this giant rabbit. So like it's another movie a little similar to what we talked about with Chicken Run and A Town Called Panic, that just embraces its own absurdity, but just has fun along the way. But also at the same time, kind of brings back that classic feeling of those horror flicks that nowadays modern horror is a lot more different than what it used to be. But this one is kind of like a throwback that also brings back what we love about horror. Now, Wallace and Gromit has already established that they know what to do very well when it comes to suspense, especially when it came to both the wrong trousers and a close shave. And they were
Yeah.
able to also bring that back as well, to add in that small light horror, to add that element of like suspense or like, like what you never know what freaky thing is going to happen next. But in here, but unlike Coraline or Kubo or Paranorman, like This one doesn't take itself seriously. Like even if
Right.
they're like even if it sets itself that something scary is gonna happen, like it's all gonna end up being a punchline where it's just gonna be like you're just gonna see a rabbit suddenly come up. But still, it's a wonderful feature that they have crafted, and I mean it shows that you can take the format of Wallace and Gromit and how it can be very well adapted onto a movie. And I mean, not to mention, this is one of the rare one of the rare non-Disney animated movies, and one of the 2 stop motion films that won an Oscar for Best Animated Feature. And
Yeah.
personally, I feel like it deserves so.
Yeah, it'd be a strong honorable mention for me. I do think I do like the shorts a hair better, but you know there's it's real strong, and those bunnies are adorable, absolutely so cute, so cute. Well, so my top 10, since I did an alphabetical, my top 10 is Coraline at number 1. I have The Nightmare Before Christmas at number 2, Chicken Run at 3, Town Called Panic at 4, Mary and Max at 5, Paranorman at 6, Marcel the Shell with Shoes On at 7, and The Adventures of Prince Ahmed at 8, Shaun the Sheep Movie at 9, and Fantastic Mr. Fox at 10. So really
Nice.
fun. Very good. Well, we want to hear what you think. What are your favorite stop motion? I'm sure there's some that we didn't even mention that you love, that you want to talk about in the comments. So please do. And all the different ones that we talked about. I would love to hear what you think about these different movies. And thanks so much for doing this. And where can people find you and your content and everything you do?
For me, well, of course, the main thing you can find me is on YouTube with Electric Dragon 505. That is my channel. And for any of the other social media sites, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, or my Patreon, you could go and find me on Matt Brunet or Animat. And also, just want to quickly mention, I also have my podcast as well, Animat's Crazy Cartoon Cast.
Yes, very, very good. I'll have all that information in the description, and make sure you check out the playlist with our other videos we've done in this series and the other times that I've done my top 50. All that's in there, so make sure you check that out. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. Check that out. And also, if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews for both of our podcasts. That helps so much. And if you're watching on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Appreciate that so much. We also have the Patreon group and merch store. You get hashtag Animation Junkie shirts at the merch store, so check that out. And thanks so much. We'll talk to y'all later. Bye.
See you later, dudes.